All right, I'll call the Richmond-Hinesburg Police Governance Committee to order. First, is there any public comment to start?
Yes,
Go ahead. Just state your name and.
Frank Haas. I've only had the opportunity to attend one of the meetings. Was I was somewhat confused about how we're gonna do an interim chief when you believe what's going on. I'd still kind of like to repeat that. You're asking a man, well, a man, woman, whatever, to come in and do something with the department when you don't know yourselves what they're gonna do. This person's gonna be strike three as far as getting other officers, because why would a police officer hire on when there is no future here that you know for sure? My thinking is you've got an election coming up in November. Figure out what Richmond and Hinesburg want. You've got the choices that he brought up in the slide, that you've got one department for two towns. You've got one department running and managing the other. It seems to me you do better with an interim chief when you actually can tell that chief, this is your job, this is what you're going to do. And like that, and if for some reason you can't do it by November, we have a town meeting in March. Let the townspeople know and give them a choice of what they want, and then you hire your interim chief. You know, I think of this from my perspective, it would be a heck of a thing to try to come in and manage what's going on right now with no set future. And I'm pretty sure you're gonna go ahead with what you're gonna do, but think about what the town wants, what the town people want, and then give them a choice, and then run your choice from that, because now you're given an interim chief. This is what we want from you. We're gonna have you run two towns. We're gonna have you pick, your staffing levels and things like that. Police officers will come on if they know that they have a future. So anyway, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Any other public comment?
Yes, I just wanna say I'm disappointed. Right now, I'm disappointed here that an officer that Richmond had gone through a process with, trained and so forth, background check, has gone to Hinesburg. In a collaborative setting, that would mean to me, hopefully, that that was a joint decision, or at least a conversation had happened. I don't know if that happened, but it just feels like it just feels like it doesn't help trust between our towns. First of all, I'm hoping that there was a conversation about that. I feel like that you guys haven't met since I think it was the 11th of July. I think there's so many questions that need to be answered by this board that this board should be working on. I don't think that this board is really like a select board, where a select board sort of stands in a position of executive position where people are bringing their proposals to them and they say yes or no. I think you guys are in a position of coming up with the creative ideas. And, should we be doing two paths at the same time? Should we be trying to do this unified district thing, that a charter change at the same time that we're trying to be working together and collaboratively? Because the questions that this group would answer for working collaboratively are the same questions that are going to need to be answered for the unified district. So I think there's so much work that can be done. I think that the group needs to be creative and working, and not waiting for someone to come in and tell us what to do. I know we have this contracted group. I haven't seen them come. But I just feel like we're kind of adrift right now, and I think it's sad, and I hope we can step up and lead and go to a place where I think both communities would like to go.
All right, thank you. All right. We consider the, or additions or deletions to the agenda? All right, consideration of approval of the minutes from 7/14.
As now I move to approve the minutes from 7/14.
I'll second.
All right, any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, next is discussion of next steps for the short term and long term, since the police services and chief services agreements have been paused. Anybody have an answer for that?
No, I mean, I guess Josh and I met with Julie. That was it Friday?
Yeah.
Friday. And. I think. Well, there's a whole bunch of stuff. I think it's pretty obvious. I don't think that we're going to find an interim chief that's gonna wanna work for two different departments that aren't working together. And also that the model that we had been using to cooperate is kind of run its course. So, the $1 million question is, what do we do next? And the general discussion that we had is, I think the only way working together is going to work is if we create a new department. Now, I haven't had opportunity to talk with Hinesburg staff about that, so I don't know where they feel about that. Josh probably hasn't had a chance to talk with Matt. The general idea is being a new municipal district that and then both departments go away. That's gonna take a long time. So I'm.
Why couldn't we start out with one town having all the police officers
I mean, that
in this contract with the other town?
right, so in theory, I don't wanna say in theory, yes, that is a way. But there needs to be basically 3 willing partners. Each town and then the union. And back in, I'll just kind of just lay this all out there, back in the spring, basically the Hinesburg officers came to me and said, this arrangement where Hinesburg is providing service, police coverage to Richmond, and Richmond isn't providing coverage to Hinesburg isn't working for us anymore. We need to do something different. So that's where, as of July 1, the agreement was made reciprocal. That created other issues that created some inequalities that couldn't continue. So that's why the coverage had to pause. I don't know how to get over that. It's one way could be, negotiate with unions. Richmond at least they have an expired contract, so they have at least something.
It's in place. I mean, it just extends until new one's in place.
Right. Hinesburg doesn't even have an agreement yet. We have, the officers are represented, but we don't even have an agreement. So we're starting from scratch, and the only meeting we've been able to successfully hold so far is like the introductory meeting where we went over ground rules. I mean, that's as far as we've gotten, and meetings keep getting canceled. So I still need to talk with Frank and the rest of the officers, but I think the current situation is probably likely to remain for a while. I just don't see any other, I don't see any other option. Is it great? No, but it's what it is.
Yeah, I think one thing we talked about last week and earlier was that in order for a short-term thing to work without a municipal district or a straight contract from one department to the other, having the same union contract would be helpful, so that way there's equity among the officers between the departments.
Right. Right.
But even that would take months to get to.
Yeah, that would take months, because I said, we're starting from absolutely zero. So one of the things we're going to try, but we don't even know if it will be successful, is seeing if we can. And there's already some roadblocks in the way. Yeah, everyone literally on the same contract. If that's possible, don't really know, but that's two boards, two managers, two different sets of employees. Union group, I mean, those are a lot of interest to try to bring together.
So when you first had the contract with Richmond, all the officers were from Hinesburg, Richmond had none?
For the most part, yeah, I think if I'm trying to remember right, it started with the chief contract.
No, it started with services, so what happened was Richmond we had two officers and they were never overlapping on the same days. And I was trying to figure out a way, could we get it so that they could have a couple of days where they work together and then a couple of days where they'd be off together essentially. Hinesburg said, yeah, we can cover 2 or 3 days a week, so you can guys have your officers work together. So that was sort of the impetus for the contract. After that, shortly after that, both of our officers left.
Right.
And then we had 0 officers. So I think for the next year, we had no officers basically. And Hinesburg was 100% covering Richmond. I think it was a couple months after we put the services contract together that we determined, yeah, having a joint chief would also be helpful so that they could kind of direct both departments, because we didn't have a chief either at that time. I think we had interim chief, but Ben was leaving.
Right.
So that's sort of how it grew. And then as we hired Matt, we had an officer, and then a year later it turned into reciprocal, and that's where we ended up now.
But was it your intention to get a full force again and not have a contract with Hinesburg anymore?
Yes, yeah, it was our intention to get a full force again. And I think that the intention of the select board, from what I've understood since when we started having that initial contract, was to move towards some sort of cooperation. We had meetings at that time, if not before, about maybe doing a municipal district and trying to get towards some sort of cooperation. And after we went through, I think about a year of the contractual agreements, it seemed to be a feeling of, okay, we've got to know each other a little bit more, we're working together. The boards have gotten to know each other, the officers are working well together, and sort of started a step towards more cooperation.
Can
So
I
with
jump
all-
in?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because you've asked a bunch of questions and some of those have been discussed in the past. So let me go back. The first question, why doesn't Richmond just dissolve its police department and contract with Hinesburg? I think I've given 4 or 5 reasons in past meetings why I, as one member of the select board, am cautious about that. And maybe a couple of highlights are the voters voted on a town budget that included a police department with positions. And for those of you who don't attend Richmond town meeting in the past or have not, the police department has been a discussion, I think, every year for the last 15 or 20 years. And it concludes with sort of a majority of the people in the room thinking we should have a police department in Richmond. So there's sort of the will of the voters, if you will, so to speak. Then we have, I think the town charter has some wrinkles about what we have for a police department. Collective bargaining agreement is, and I'm going to refer to that as a collective bargaining agreement as opposed to a contract, because we got contracts and agreements of various types running around here. It's my view that collective bargaining agreement is a substantial obstacle to just eliminate the department and contract somewhere else. It's pretty clear to me that that would violate fair labor standards. Like you can't just move your union manufacturing shop from Richmond to Hinesburg and then employ non-union members at a different pay scale, the union will always fight that, right? Because their job is to represent the existing cohort or collective bargaining unit. And then the last thing I'll say is the loss of authority and control. Like, so that was the point of having these partnerships and moving towards a municipal district. I think of similar things like, why don't you just eliminate the highway department and contract with somebody else, or close your school and send your kids to the school in the neighboring town. All those things are controversial. So it seems to me that we had in our select board, we had a conversation about the near term, let's try to recruit and retain officers. And medium to long term, there's an economy of scale. We've talked about that numerous times, and stability and opportunity for personnel in a larger department, including the possibility of sort of shared police services or patrols at different times. But that has been mostly conceptual, given that I don't think we've ever been fully staffed at the same time in recent years. And so, based on recent events, the last month or two, it seems to me we might sort of stumble along. If we don't have a contract for services back and forth, we stumble along. And then is it plausible that this group would work on the medium to long-term goal of what would a future sort of single department look like? I don't know if that makes sense to folks, but I think that's, David, did that seem to capture the conversation at the Richmond Select Board?
Yeah, that's a good recap. There's a lot of history there, but I think you summed it up pretty well.
So my opinion, that's why we're at where we're at. Is because we keep hearing this same thing every time we have a meeting. I think that's why we need to have this pause. And Richmond needs to decide if you want to have a contract with Hinesburg. I think it needs to be one department.
So your view is it the position of the Hinesburg Select Board and Town Manager, the solution to this is Richmond closes its department and contracts with Hinesburg? David, I think what we ought to do is invite Hinesburg
I'm gonna stop you right
representatives to
there.
a meeting.
It's my opinion.
I didn't say that. But I
So-
think I think Heinsberg's path forward for the near term is rebuilding and serving Heinsberg.
Fair enough.
Mind if I
Is that-
jump in?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think basically what has happened is, again, I think like Todd mentioned early on, the contracts run its course. We keep talking about contracts, and Bard, you keep bringing up the fact that the contract doesn't really mean anything anyway. So I think we're at a position where we stop working on a contract, and then if there is goodwill to work toward a single department, we could start having that conversation. But separately, I think both towns need to focus on the value they have in their own police departments, make sure our staff are feeling supported and building to what the local residents want. So, if we can get to an intermunicipal district at some point, that would be great. And yes, that certainly would have to go to the voters. Hinesburg doesn't even have a town charter, so the conversation of charters is a moot point on our side. But I think, like Dennis said, we keep having this conversation every time we come together, and we're just spinning our wheels. So if we want to put a group together to talk about an intermunicipal contract and what that would look like and something we could bring to the voters, that might be okay. But just think trying to work with two different union contracts or agreements and two different departments at this point has just become convoluted.
That makes sense to me. Where I was going to go before, it is, it's not an entirely outlandish proposition to say, hey, if you can't recruit officers, do you want to close your police department and contract with the next town? So we've talked about all the obstacles, but I don't think we've ever had the conversation with anybody from Hinesburg in the room to say, oh, they're serious, they're interested. Presumably you'd have to get more officers than you currently have, that you'd have to pursue a bandwidth that would be wide enough. And we still have the same obstacles to run through, but at least be upfront, is that our desired destination? It seems unlikely to me, but it might be worth at least doing a, due diligence to consider that. And then what's left on the table, Mike, as you point out, is this medium to long term, like we try to keep going in the interim and pursue this longer term district approach. I think that's what you were suggesting, right?
Well, what I'm suggesting is I don't think Hinesburg can continue with the current contract. That's why the select board at our last meeting voted to suspend the contract for now.
Yep.
I think Hinesburg is very open to municipal agreements that allow us to have a single department in some form. But it would have to be with a partner that's very interested in doing that and putting together the time and effort to make one department.
And I think,
And again, I'm kind of speaking for myself, but certainly there's a lot of nuances to it.
and I think in order for the two towns to get there, that's something that both towns are very likely will need to address in their CBAs, is sort of in the what if scenario, what happens? So the employees who are covered by those agreements know exactly how they will be treated in the event that either department or both departments, frankly, kind of cease to exist and become something else. I mean, I think it's only fair. The employees are going to want to know that. They don't. I think one of the things we're dealing with now is that the employees currently know where they work, what they're doing, what the rules are. Anything other than that is an unknown. And, most people don't like unknowns. So that's why I think both towns would probably need to address that in their, whatever agreements or CBAs they come up with. And I think once we address that, I think we have a higher likelihood of success in working together in the future.
But I think we need to tell them, it'd be nice if we decided one of the other departments is going away and there's gonna be one department.
Well,
Wouldn't it be so much easier to hire officers?
I think generally, yes, a bigger department with more opportunities.
More opportunities, we've already all
Yes.
agreed on that.
Yeah, yes, but I think there are some steps we need to take care of first, before we get there.
And
Can I
Dennis,
suggest
I
there's
think
more
what-
choices than that? So the choices are, we go our separate ways, right? Do what we've done for the last, whatever it is, 85 years. Another choice is one department goes away and the town A contracts with town B. That is the second choice. The third choice is this district approach where there's shared governance. What I have picked up so far to date, at least in Richmond, is enthusiasm for the last one, the third option, a district with shared governance and transparent budgets and budget passing, sort of like schools. It's clear to you that schools used to be part of town government, right? And they aren't anymore. So it'd be similar to taking the schools out of the town and moving it somewhere else. And here, instead of schools, it's police into a bigger district than the town. And again, it's not outlandish if we want to have a conversation jointly at maybe our shared select board meetings. Is either town interested in closing down its police department and contracting with the other? To date, I haven't seen a lot of interest in that from either citizens or select board in Richmond, but hey, I've been wrong before, I'll be wrong again.
Yeah, and I was gonna jump in as well. Dennis, I don't think it is a matter of closing down one or the other department because I mean, I think the reality is Richmond's been very clear that that's not what they want to do with and or through us. So I would hate to get pretty far down that road and just have it be, you know, for nothing. I think it's kind of moving toward what is the next stage of a police department that is both Richmond and Hinesburg.
I think, you know, the one thing that, and I talked about this with Julie and Josh on Friday, is the one thing that does give me a little pause or concern about a unified police department is that something the employees want? I mean, that's a pretty big unknown. What will that be? Who will I be working for? Who will I be answering to? Because there's a lot of other departments that are still in this county that they probably know pretty well and know exactly what the job would be and who the leader is and who they're responsible, who they be reporting to. So it's just, I think that's something we should keep in mind that, you know, that's a pretty new thing, and new things can be scary to people, especially when there's no known options out there. And, you know, just as an example, I had floated the idea a few meetings ago. I was like, well, you know, if all the employees want to become Richmond employees and we just contract back with Hinesburg, you know, that's something I'd be open to. And what I heard from the Hinesburg officers is like, we really like being Hinesburg employees. So, you know, which is fair. Like, yeah, I'm not going to take that away from anyone. So just, there's a lot of landmines, I think, out there that we just need to be aware of. And I think we're all in agreement that we want to hang on to the people that we have. That's the most important thing to me right now. For both towns.
And I will say, the employee side and the recruiting side, when we have a direction, a clear direction, it will be easier to maintain and recruit people. When we say, this is what the next year to 2 years looks like, this is what next 4 to 5 years look like. It is easier to tell an officer, hey, come work for us. This is what your job's gonna look like in 2 years. This is what your job's gonna look like in 5 years. And if we move on to the union municipal district or joint department, we're going to prove that model works to people to get them to sign on. And we have to make that, there's going to be a transition time where we're going to prove it's working as we're trying to recruit people into it. So the more people we have before we start that process, the more people, employees we all have together as we work towards that goal, the easier it will be to say, hey, this model still works and this is why we're doing it.
So are you saying one town has all the employees and we see how that works?
No, I am just saying that I don't know, I'm not making a decision for either side. I'm saying that the more employees that we have as a net pool, as we build this to closer and closer together to the point we actually merge together, if that's the way we want to merge and come together, whatever that looks like, the more people we have doing it to prove this model works, the easier it'll be and faster that transition time will go by, where we can continue to recruit people.
Right, but the model would be one town has all the employees. That would be the model to make it. To see, that's how a municipal district would work. I would
No,
think.
it's not.
No, it's
So
zone
so
entity.
both departments dissolve, you create a new department called the Richmond-Hinesburg.
I understand that.
So both departments are gone, there's one brand new department that covers both towns with a shared governance structure of Richmond and Hinesburg select board members on a committee to govern the new district.
Yeah, they were,
And
right,
provide
but I-
services. So there's no Hinesburg officers, there's no Richmond officers.
Dennis,
It's all under one
we'd
separate
be
thing.
creating a new municipality that would,
I understand that, but one town having all of them for now
For now.
would be the model, it would look like the government's,
it would be,
right?
it would be a step forward.
Right, that's what I mean. Isn't that the short term? And
Um,
then the governments, we all know it's gonna take what, months, years to ever get to that
Years.
point? That'd be the long term.
right. I mean,
Yeah,
yes,
but
that's the approach, but that counts on, then that brings in all these other factors of what the employees wanna do, and the towns wanna do, and
And
Well,
the-
the
Yeah.
union.
And I mean, and just to be blunt, I mean, again, we've been hearing consistently that is not what Richmond wants to do. So,
Well, in the beginning of all this, I mean, I think citizens from Richmond came to our select board meeting loving how the new contract was working in Hinesburg. They really enjoyed having Hinesburg police officers over there.
Yeah,
Go
so
ahead.
this is my point. I mean, it's not outlandish to bring it to the select board and the voters and see if they want to do that. I frankly don't picture the select board trying to eliminate our police department as a select board action and contract with Hinesburg. And that's leaving aside the legal vehicles of the charter and the CBA, I think neither one of which you currently have. So it's a different sort of environment or different guardrails. So I was serious when I say it's not outlandish and see what the voters want to do. I've described this as a dating relationship, and a couple of years ago we had no dates, and then we were dating every week for a long time. And we got lots of positive feedback in Richmond about Hinesburg officers. Um, the wrinkles are the sort of, legal and political authority under both the vote, the charter, and the collective bargaining agreement. But it's something we could contemplate. It's, I think, and we'd have to consult our attorney. I think it would likely take a vote, if not a charter change, to eliminate the department and contract with another entity, whether it's Hinesburg or somebody else.
Go ahead.
So we have been contracted with Heinsberg, so I don't, it seems like we could probably continue doing that for police officers. I'm gonna propose something outlandish. And that I think that, could be, if you decided that you would go in this direction, would show that both Heinsberg and Richmond have an interest in joining together, and therefore in the future might want to do a municipal district. Because, this group has to have that as their goal. Does this group really have as their goal that they would like to? I see so many benefits, the biggest one being coverage. I think that's a big one for our communities. But I would propose that would Hinesburg be willing to have Richmond hold the contract for the chief? And Hinesburg hold the contract for the officers? And because we are theoretically all sharing and we're cooperating and we're having that conversation. I think that would be, maybe people in Richmond go, oh, well, we'll still have skin in the game here. We're not completely hanging off a limb if Hinesburg decides to, whatever. So I would throw that out. How about we hire the chief? Obviously, this group will go through a process of picking the appropriate person. They should all be on, we should have people from both Richmond and Hinesburg selecting that police chief. But the chief contract is actually held by Richmond, and the police officers contract is held by Hinesburg. That eliminates your problem with the union. because the chief is not a union person. And that would show kind of good faith for both towns. So I would just throw that out to you as a possibility.
I'm guessing that probably wouldn't work. But I
Why
think the
not?
good faith thing would be, we see how it goes, and if we all work together. That's just, we all work together, if that Richmond has an issue with the way the police are doing something or whatever, and we talk it through and we take care of it, I think that's,
I don't understand why it wouldn't work. I mean, we had already offered a contract to Chief Cambridge. In other words, we were going to have a situation where the chief was gonna be hired and have a contract.
Offering it doesn't mean it would have worked.
On,
You said you were gonna offer it to him, but that doesn't mean it was gonna work.
well, I mean.
And I don't think it would have.
Well, I'm just saying that was the offer, that was the accepted offer. To have a chief.
Yeah.
And officers here and officers in Richmond at that point. I'm proposing something new, which is all the officers and the chief. And, you know, I don't know.
I think in reality, the either town providing police coverage to another town isn't going to be possible until both towns get through their collective bargaining process. I just think that's just the reality of it.
right, did you have something?
Well, I was gonna say that I don't agree. The chief cannot have the officer working for one town and the chief works for another, even though there's functional supervision. I just couldn't possibly see it working. The thing with the collective bargaining is, okay, Hinesburg is not union yet.
Yes, they are.
What? Oh, they aren't official, but you said that they haven't bargained.
We don't have a contract yet, but they're covered by the representative.
Okay, and is that contract the same as you have? Cause I believe you've got like a take home car and
So,
stuff like that.
The Richmond contract has already been in place for years,
Right.
private, and that contract is in negotiations now for renewal.
So is the goal gonna be to try to make those two contracts similar to where all of a sudden you can? The thing that we have advantage in Vermont is the fact that a police officer here
Yeah.
is a police officer everywhere, Brattleboro, Rutland,
Yep.
it doesn't matter. That's what allows this kind of a ease to go between towns. And I just, this has been a little bit more complex. When they started this whole thing, the contracting and all that, what I didn't understand is if there's only two officers on, then that's two officers for both towns. And you do your proactive, you do your reactive and like that. But with the contract and the only thing you need to do is make sure one town doesn't get screwed. If you only have two officers here, you've got one officer there, just simply make sure that you have the coverage together. And, you know, ideally, I think that we should. I don't agree with dissolving the department, because when you dissolve a department, now you set up this contract. Well, a year from now, you can decide, maybe I want to let Chittenden County Sheriffs bid on it, or something like that. If you set up the two departments together as one department, you have a future there. That isn't, I really think that's the best thing to do, is just, and I think you're gonna get a stronger department, and you're gonna have officers that maybe want to actually work there. I'm sorry, everybody's quiet.
We've all saying the kind of the same thing meeting after meeting, and I kind of, not really anything new to say.
I mean, if we tried one town having all the officers, could the other towns still have their police department, but just not? No one works for it? It's not dissolved? They just do not have any employees,
You know,
or is that just too easy?
I don't think that would work at all with the union.
Yeah.
They would want to see that we're trying to hire officers for our positions. And we can't just not have a department or staff it.
So what are they doing to What are they saying? You're not able to hire officers. So.
Right.
I guess I don't really understand the whole union thing. I mean, if all the officers are working for one town, they're under a union. Right? So I don't understand the issue. What are they gonna do? You have no officers.
Well, I think it's a fair
I mean,
question.
what's-
If
what-
it's the same union with the same agreement and there's no difference, I think that makes it a level playing field, but that level playing field does not currently exist, right? And I'm assuming that you're negotiating with the same collective bargaining representative or union.
Yes,
So that's a strength. I mean, I have thought about this for a while and thinking the ideal state, just as was pointed out, if in some period of months we can end two different collective bargaining processes with the same results, that would be ideal. There are wrinkles having been through collective bargaining, including public comments are embargoed. You can't talk about the details unless you somehow agree with the union to talk about the details during collective bargaining. I've never seen that happen myself. Um, so I guess if we were thinking about a task for this group or a goal, that would seem an obvious one, that we want to end up with the same collective bargaining agreement for the currently two separate bargaining units. Does that make sense?
yeah, I mean, yeah, that's what I said earlier, but that, negotiating with two different legislative bodies and will be a challenge. And we, at this point, we really can't, so that's something Josh and I are trying to figure out.
So
And we
having
might
thought
not- we
about
might
this a
not
bit,
advance.
it seemed, here's one scenario, that one collective bargaining agreement crosses the finish line first. Once it's ratified, crosses the finish line, it's a public document. If that's town one, now they're done. If town two is still negotiating, it would not be outlandish for town two to say, we want the same deal that town one got. So if town one could agree with the union, presumably the union would agree to the same deal with town two. That's a lot of hypotheticals, but that is one way that it could potentially occur without violating any of the collective bargaining restrictions.
No, I think what we would
True,
need.
but
We would need
that
to
would
get.
give up, sorry, Todd.
Sorry, Mike.
I was gonna say that would give up one town's ability to actually negotiate the contract.
Oh, it wouldn't. They just say if
Oh,
they
it
think
would.
that
I
this,
mean,
no, it wouldn't, because they're not obligated to do that. They're only if they're inclined to do that. So they could negotiate to the same detail, but it would have to be voluntary. We can't like oblige either town by a conversation here today.
right, but that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
As you were putting it, was whoever gets across the finish line first, the other town would need to agree to that same. Well, if we were going to go down this road, then
That would remove one obstacle. And it's got a level of uncertainty, right? As you
right,
suggest.
exactly.
What we would really need to do that effectively would be an agreement among all the parties that the parties can talk to each other as they're negotiating.
As
That's
part of
what-
the ground rules.
Yes,
Yeah. So that's the front end for folks who haven't been through this or aren't paying close attention. That's one of the first things you do. And there are standard ground rules that say don't talk to anybody, but you could make an exception to that.
So is that something you wanna try to pursue? I mean,
I think it's about the only play we kind of have left. at
I
this
mean, if we're
point.
gonna continue to try to work together, I think we need the same agreement, so. I don't know if that's ever been done, if there's any model on how you do that, but. You should maybe try
It
to
would be
find out.
complicated, but the immediate thing would be can we get agreement in ground rules
Right.
that, you know, you and I can talk to each other, the select boards can, you and I can talk to each other, you know, the employees from the different towns can talk together or talk to each other. You know, if we're, cause I think the only path right now, I don't think there's a way to negotiate, you know, there to be in agreement with the union that is also signed by Hinesburg and Richmond. It would need to be, it would be two separate agreements.
Yeah, I would see it as that too, but I wonder, could we have it where representatives from Richmond and Hinesburg, representatives of officers from Richmond and Hinesburg are in the same negotiating room,
I
working at
think
the same time?
everyone would have to agree to
Of
that.
course, but I think that would be the most efficient way if we're gonna try to do it.
Yeah, the only hard part is kind of different, you know, different perspectives. For example, I was, you know, it's pretty known right now, your contract, provides every officer with a take-home vehicle. We don't do that.
Right, so that would be one of the things we'd have to all talk about.
Right.
Who wants one?
And there's different perspectives on that, I'm
Well,
sure.
right, but that's where I'm thinking that if we were all in the same room together, we would at least be able to hash through those different perspectives.
Right.
Whereas if Richmond talked about it, Ivor talked about it, and then you and I talked about it separately, like. We would get nowhere and it would take us a long time to get.
Oh, yeah.
And I have a procedural question more if different stages of contract negotiations taking place. Can they even come back together at that point?
That's a good point, because we actually technically are several months into our negotiating.
That's a question for someone.
Well, you know, I mean, but like, again, I think that all goes back to people agreeing to do that.
Right,
I don't know, that's again, that's a procedural question, I don't know what the answer is.
No, I mean, I think it's all up to the people involved.
I mean, my argument is how far down that road and how many hoops you want to jump through for something that I don't see that working. Honestly, I don't see bringing in two different groups of officers, two different management styles and a union and expecting everybody to come to an agreement on how that's going to work out.
Yeah, well, won't be easy.
That's why, I mean, again, you know, with Hinesburg suspending the contract, personally, if I think there's time and energy to put anywhere, it would be how does it work for a municipal district? And do we want to go down that road? I don't know if it's like Frank said, first step is going to the voters and saying, is this something you want your select board to spend time on? But I mean, even right now with the two different union contracts, we're not even coming together on, you know, the pay we're going to give or the reciprocal agreements and that sort of thing. So I just keep thinking we're going to hit roadblocks.
You know, it's a fair point. I actually thought like 2 or 3 months ago, having the same collective bargaining agreements would be removing one of the big obstacles to contracting back and forth. But if we're not contracting back and forth, that obstacle becomes effectively moot. I think that's kind of your point. And so if we shift from, if our near term is try to hire staff, arguably we're looking at 2 different chiefs then. I don't know about you, but we budgeted money for a halftime chief, so we're going to have to deal with that. And then moving forward, focus on the municipal district. And you're right, early on, whether it was Frank's suggestion or somebody else's, you probably want to do some voter sort of engagement and vote. Is this something that you want to support or not? It was clear to me that a lot of, I think it's everybody on the select board, and frankly, a lot of senior police officers, management around the state think it's a great idea, but that doesn't mean the voters will think it's a great idea, right?
Right. But
I think I disagree with not having standing. If you guys just completely disband the Richmond Police Department, I don't think the union has got standing to help protect something that has been disbanded. Usually that's protection to where, yeah, if you lay off or you do things like that. Why isn't it to the union's advantage to start working with you people rather than months and months and months? Maybe it needs to be pointed out that the faster or they can do this is to the benefit of the employees.
Who's
And I
speaking
just
now?
don't understand the months and months and months. thing.
Frank.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, you know, we've talked around everything. I don't, you know, as I said before, I think we're in a position where, for the time being, both departments are gonna, you know, try to restaff, increase their coverage, and then, to the extent their budget allows them, and then figure out if there's a way to come, together one way or another in the future. I don't really see any other options at this point, unless one town or the other and their employees are just willing to say, you know, fold us into the other town. And but they might, and I'm not even suggesting that anyone wants to do that.
Well, I think we want to be clear about the stakeholders. So it's not just employees and select board, in my opinion. And maybe it's easier if you don't have a charter or collective bargaining agreement. So we do have an employees and the union. We've got the select board, and then we've got the voters and the charter, at
Right,
least
yeah.
in Richmond.
Yeah,
So I remember when we first started this group, we had, I think it might have been our attorney, that came in and talked about the path for Union Municipal District. And it might be helpful to revisit that with this group and figure out how you do that, because as I recall from that, it's a couple-year process because there's a lot of public outreach. There's a lot of feedback from the communities. There's a lot of sort of how would this work and putting up structures. And at the time, I think Richmond had an interim chief because our chief had just left. Hinesburg had a chief. But right now, both communities are in a situation where we don't have a permanent chief. We each have interim chiefs, or we will. Would this be almost a good time to say, okay, let's explore the municipal district, let's go down that path, let's keep interim chiefs in place. And it allow, that way, because one of the concerns was, if we had a municipal district and it came together and there was a chief in Hinesburg, we couldn't guarantee that that chief is gonna be the chief of that district. But right now with interim chiefs, it might allow some of that flexibility. Or, I guess,
yeah, I guess it's kind of up to what each board wants to do.
yeah,
Well, I think we should revisit it. I think probably both boards. We've talked about it a lot over the last 4 or 5 years, and there was, last time we talked about it, a continued interest in a joint police department with a form of governance and budget building that was not the same as you close down and contract, but a joint venture, as opposed to something else. So that's where we've been clear about that for years. So if we're going to deviate from that path, it's probably a different conversation. What's the other goal? And we could revisit it again. But David, I think every time we've had this conversation, there has been support for it, in terms of a joint sort of department.
Very much so. I mean, you know, the reality is both Hinesburg and Richmond don't have a full functioning department. So we've been sharing that burden and working through it together. And the public perception of the effectiveness of that I've seen has been very positive. So you know, I think we need to continue.
And I think a clear early sort of win for the voters was each town pays for half of a chief, and that was seen as a financial win to the degree that that's significant. But voters saw that as a win. Like, And it calls the question of how many chiefs do you need for policing in Chittenden County? And I think there's a general consensus, fewer than we currently have.
Ready to move on? Go ahead.
So I guess, I think I just heard Barb and David say that they do think that the select board in Richmond is interested in potentially pursuing the municipal district as their long-term goal, a joint. Am I correct? Is that what you guys are saying? Because what I've just heard Josh suggest is that this group revisit that. And if that's true, I guess the Hinesburg select board would also need to sort of weigh in on that. Is that something you want to look into? Is that a long-term goal of has Hinesburg select board talked about this?
Not recently, no.
I mean, I think most of us all agree that we need to start sharing between towns because we can't get enough help. You know, fire departments help each other out. They can't get enough help. I mean,
So I guess the question is, would the Hinesburg select board be interested in doing what Josh just suggested, that we revisit what is involved in doing a municipal district, which would be full partnership from both towns in a police district?
I think you'd have to bring that back to the board.
but just so everybody realizes, that will be a long term.
Well, this has been a long track, a long.
Well, no, it's
I mean-
been a long, short term.
Yeah, but it doesn't help you guys out in the short term. So if that's how you guys want to,
I'm not
we
sure
beat
where-
this to death, so you need to decide.
Well, I'm just not sure where we can go with the
It might be
short term. I mean, with the discrepancies between the two unions on pay, I don't know where we can go in the short term unless we're able to solve that somehow. I think the benefit of having the last 2 years is that we've all worked together. We've seen the pros, the cons. I think we've proved that we can work together. And that's where I'm sort of at the point of, if we try to staff up each department as best we can, work for the municipal district and shoot for the long term.
I'm full, but that's kind of where I am. I think we could ask voters at the town meeting. You know, here's where the departments are. Do you have an interest in this model? If so, you know, work on it, but I think everyone's got plenty to do that. I think we would want to ask the voters before we spend any more effort on, you know, something like that.
Okay,
One off suggestion, as we get into contracts. If we are moving towards this, everyone being on the same contract schedule at least. So that way, when we come to the next contracts or when they expire, we all have the expiration date at the same time, so we can sit down. You might be able to set the ground rules all together at the next one. That might be a medium term. Looking, okay, instead of a 3-year contract, one's gonna be a 2-year, one's gonna be a 3-year contract, or whatever it is, to sit back down together. Rely on.
Yeah, well, that will take some work, cause I couldn't even ask Josh right now what you're thinking of a term.
I have no idea.
Legally, he couldn't ask me, right?
I couldn't ask you.
I couldn't respond.
Yeah,
all right. Update on the status of the search for the interim police chief and discussion of how an interim chief agreement would be structured to meet the needs of both departments in the short term and long term.
I think it's kind of moved at this point.
Yeah,
So that's fine. That is sort of a shift. So this is consistent with what we said. Don't we also have a contract for recruitment that's split between the two towns?
Mm-hmm,
So we've got to modify that or terminate that, right?
yeah,
I mean, it's
Josh
just
and I-
housekeeping. Yeah.
yeah, Josh and I will need to talk with Julie.
I think we have to
and-
pay for it and be done.
Well, yeah, talk with Julie and Jim about that. And then we can just email back, but I'm,
so they will still be looking for an interim chief for,
we
No,
will,
I think at this point, we stop it.
we'll have to, yeah, we'll talk with them.
I think we would stop the search, we pay for the work done so far.
Yeah,
There's really no need for an interim right now. At least the way we had decided it 2 months ago.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
Okay. Discussion of ground rules for the committee?
I think this was my suggestion, and we've actually covered a bunch of it today, which is be clear about the goals and how we're going to manage as a group. But some of that, I think, should be driven by what our goals are. So ground rules, it's sort of like collective bargaining, like chair, how many people, if you're going to vote on things, how does voting work? And some of that's going to be easier here because this group doesn't really have much authority. It's advisory recommendation, right? It's kind of a conduit. So it came up. I thought I'd mention it. I don't know. We might be more articulate about the role of select boards. So when I talk here, I'm telling you basically my opinion of what I have seen of the other select board members. But if we're going to make an actual decision, of course, you got to take it back and have a vote. So that's sort of some of the ground rules, just to be clear about that. I don't know if other people have thoughts. It would also be maybe decision making about recruitment, but that's moot now. So maybe it's much smaller and becomes more focused if we do in fact decide to go pursue a new police district.
I guess I would suggest if we're going to decide to look at long-term and not worry as much about short-term, we could probably cover ground rules and that with the new group that forms to focus on that. Because it might not even be this group.
I just want to clarify, so is on the next agenda reviewing what a municipal district would require? Is that what is on the agenda for next week, the 2 weeks from now? Like, what is that?
I don't think we're gonna have another meeting until both towns decide if they want a municipal district.
So, but before we have a meeting to find out what that is? Do you know what that is? I mean, it sounds as though there's information about what that is and what that would involve. Like Josh was saying, he could offer us up, but I don't know.
I mean, I've got notes from our meeting 2 years ago, or whatever it was. What was helpful at that meeting was, I think we had Attorney Joe McLean join the meeting to kind of go over how that worked. I think Trevor Whipple also joined the meeting from BLCT. And so that it was helpful to have two people who were more or less experts in it. Explain it.
I think it'd be premature to restart those discussions right now. It's just my opinion. As I said before, I think it's something that we likely need to address. Or I think it's likely to come up in bargaining. And having it settled there, if it does come up, would make, I think, there'd be some more knowns going forward if we decide to go down that path, but I don't really see, if we had a meeting in 2 weeks about what is a municipal district? I mean, what would we be doing after that?
So then the next steps would seem to be each town sort of go back and say, are we interested in pursuing, creating a group to pursue a municipal district for policing across the two towns? And it's a supposal, not a proposal. Like, suppose you could pull the plug on it any time. It's just go down this path of exploring it.
Right, and I don't want to really go into the rabbit hole of the Union Municipal District right now, but you may recall, you may not, but one of the first steps was the two boards creating what's called the Joint Survey Committee. And we had something drafted about, what would a joint survey committee be? And it's actually the job of the Joint Survey Committee to determine whether or not it makes sense to do a union municipal district. So I would. You know, I think for the next couple months, we just pause on meeting and maybe regroup. But, you know, I think the most important thing for both communities and departments right now is figuring out what we're, you know, what's the next 3 months look like. 6 months, you know, year. Because we're coming into our budget time, so both is gonna have to be figuring out, what am I budgeting? Am I budgeting for full chief, part-time chief? I think I know what the answer is, but
I guess. I don't know, I mean, if both select boards feel like creating a union municipal district is something that they would like to explore. I think it might be worth knowing that sooner rather than later, and we could form the joint survey committee. Even if that forms in the next month or so, then we start to gather feedback from the people, and if we go 6 months into that, we say this isn't gonna work, then you stop it, or if we get good feedback. Then you go, I don't know that why we would wait to explore if we wanna work together.
well, yeah, I think that's a select board decision. So, you know, I think in the near term, I don't see.
But if
What's-
if next week at their meetings, they will say, yeah, we wanna do this. Then I think we have to figure out the joint committee.
Right. I guess I'm saying, I don't see a role for this committee in that.
Right, it might be a whole new committee, or it
Right.
might be many of the same people,
Right.
because. It probably would be some of the same players on that committee.
So then I think we should both boards should, you know, within the next month, put on their agenda what, you know, kind of given this development, what do they want to do?
Right.
Anybody else have anything?
I'm sorry, just one more thing.
Go ahead.
You're going months and months and months ahead to do a joint whatever, when you don't even know what the residents want. If you go through all of this, you go through the delays and all of that, and then Richmond decides, we don't want to share, we want our own police department. Then where do you go from there, other than having to start from scratch and then going that way? You know, I just have to say, being a Hinesburg resident, we don't have a police department on weekends. We don't have a police department after 11 o'clock at night. Somewhere in here, I think we need to kind of run with a sense of urgency that we need to fix this problem. Because he's not gonna be able to hire all of these officers when we have this kind of an indecision. Because these officers can get a job almost anywhere, because almost all the other departments are hiring. I just don't see a sense of urgency to try to fix this problem. And like I said, when you go off in a direction of the district, which I don't care, I don't think it's a bad idea for us to join towns. But you need to find out what the people want and then go in that direction, because then you could hit the ground running that, no, Richmond or Hinesburg doesn't want to share. Then we can start from there. Hire the chief who can make decisions and then do the recruiting. So thank you, and I'm done.
Yeah, Frank, I think one of the first tasks of the joint committee, if I understood, would be public engagement and getting a sense of what the residents of the towns would be looking for. So that would be like square one.
And by that, including a vote early on. I mean, you got to get at least a referendum, I think, at least advisory. Do you want to pursue this or not?
All right. I don't think there's any items for the next agenda, because we're
Not at this point.
not at this point until we,
Both boards talk.
and we should have it on our agenda item next select board meeting. We have enough,
Yep, do the first
So it'll
one.
be our,
it'll be on yours.
Tuesday. This week. Sure.
Okay.
Well, thanks for working on this. I would say I'll only observe if it was easy, somebody probably would have done it by now. So.
Mhm. All right, motion.
Oh, I motion to adjourn.
All right.
Second,
All those in favor?
Aye,
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Have a good day, everyone.
take care, Rin.